So it says we're live.
I saw a notice here.
You got a notice? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Coming up on 8 o'clock. And I believe we are streaming live too. Let's see these places. Facebook group, YouTube now. Also Periscope and other places. So we're gonna go ahead and get started. Welcome to Sunday Live with the Articles of ADOS. I am here with my co-host Daoud Jiazan. And we're going to discuss episode 3 of the podcast. We're just going to freestyle it. There's no what do you call it?
Rhyme or reason?
Yes, rhyme or reason. So there will be a little bit of lag. We're live here, but it's going to take a few seconds to reach all the places that you are watching. But if you do have a comment or a question anytime through this broadcast, go ahead, leave it below, and either Daoud or myself, if we catch it, we'll respond to it as fast as we can. I do believe that I can also read your chats in a different way. Let's see. Open in browser. All right. So yes, let's go ahead and get started. Daoud, you're in the background. And so unless you're not ready, but let's go ahead and get started. Let's go ahead and get started. You ready?
Ready.
Ready, okay. I hurt myself. This technology thing is nuts. Okay, so episode 3 was called Trolling Russians and Who Else? And we started off with a personality piece where we explained what undiscussed news was, how we approached it, what we mean by it. Daoud came up with his approach and the reason why he feels is undiscussed news and how it affects ADOS family. Mine was a little bit more simpler. It's just a lot of information was being shared and I was missing it. I was missing a lot of it. And if I did get a chance to read it or digest it, I didn't follow up with any of the information that was maybe in the article or anything. I didn't discuss it with anybody. So yeah, I got feedback, Daoud. Miles speaker.
No, I have you. I'm plugged in so I could hear you better, more clear.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll move on when if there's any feedback, my bad. Let us know in the comment section below if you hear feedback or any echoing. But that was my main approach to undiscussed news. Is just I was sharing a lot of information on Twitter, on Facebook. I was seeing a lot of articles and information, and just I would look at the title of the article and I wouldn't. That's basically as much I was doing it. I either agreed with the title or didn't. If the title was provocative enough, I wouldn't possibly read it. But and then I would also get Breaking Brown newsletter, every week, and I couldn't get the chance to catch those. I would, open it and look and look at the articles, but it was rare that I would actually read an article. So I felt like a lot of the news I was getting just was going undiscussed, because of course Tone and Yvette would choose a topic, or it was something more immediate. There was something going on that week that the articles in her newsletter weren't being talked about, but other more important news was being discussed on her show. So, or Tone would do it on his show. So that's the reason why I started the podcast, honestly. And then Daoud came in, and Daoud, I would like for you to explain to him. You did the story with the judges, and explain how, yeah, we're not getting information, or not and we're not connecting with the articles that are shared, but there's other side to undiscussed news. Would you elaborate on that with the listeners?
Well, context is everything. So if you have a story that's important to the African American community or ADOS community, and you're not mentioned in it, your interests, your goals, your desires, your hopes, dashed or not, if they're not mentioned, then you have to infer a lot of information that is not readily available. So, is the indication of the issue with the judges being corrupted and running their system with uh, youth jailers in the state? I had to infer that I know more Black children are involved in being bulldozed into locked facilities.
Oh, we're
But it wasn't.
offline. Hold on. Are we offline?
It's recording live here from my
Oh,
end.
yeah, I don't know what happened. Hold on. Are we back? I don't know what happened. Yeah, I think we're back now. I think, I don't know. Yeah, so, okay, we'll keep going. Sorry about that. Looked like it went offline for a second.
Hmm. So that means they're probably listening. But anyway, uh, the the judges were corrupt, and they were bulldozing young people into the system of locked facilities and youth facilities. And I inherently knew that Black children were disproportionately the ones being sent. But that wasn't evidenced by the context in which the news stories, a series of news stories, were providing on the matter. What they were showing were angry mothers, in depth stories on white youth who were being bulldozed into the system. And then the day the judge, I guess the lead judge that was doing, I guess, the biggest under the table payoffs, he was being carted off to jail, and the news media featured the mother screaming at him as he's being led out in handcuffs. And I suppose that there would have been more Black mothers there. And I must also say there probably were Black mothers, those who were affected, but they were purposely edited out or not even interviewed at all because they represented the bulk of the people involved in that scandal. And most of us, I remember at the time, Black society did not really raise a ruckus on that matter when they were introducing mass incarceration to our children in Philadelphia. And I know that we would normally be upset and create a ruckus, but we didn't. Not only did not our leadership, quote unquote, from the NAACP or Urban League and other civil rights groups, none of them raised a peep. Well, I can only suspect that because it was contextualized as a white youth and family problem, and it was played out that way. We did not feel the brunt, as we should have, of that situation that disproportionately affected Black youth. It's been 7 to 10 years since that time frame, since that occurrence, and now I'm getting some news that's coming out about what happened back when, And by the way, all these black children were sent. And so I knew it intellectually, but it didn't touch my heart and emote any effort on my part uh, at the time, because I intellectually knew there were more black people involved. I just did not know how bad, because it was undiscussed, because it was left out of the news.
Okay. Yeah, so the undiscussed news is our tagline, and our mission, really, to the news that we get, try to discuss it, have some commentary on it, and not just click and share, click and share, click and share, as so often happens. And it's not anything that you're doing wrong. We're busy. A lot of information is being shared. I mean, I actually thought we were sharing too much, because that's just how much news is happening right now. But regardless, we have to get that information to you. If you feel overwhelmed or it's too much, go and come back, and or if you feel this article we shared and you want us to discuss it, let us know, and we'll add it to the show. What else in that episode 3? In one of the rapid news pieces, Daoud shared a story on Gary Webb. And for those of you who don't know, Gary Webb was the guy that snitched on the CIA. Is the my way of saying he told on his folks. So I'm gonna let Daoud take over here and talk about that rapid news piece. I thought it was important. It uncovered and took the blame off of the Black community of what was going on at the time, and as far as crack cocaine, how it was getting into our communities, how it devastated our communities, and whose fault it was. And Gary Webb brought that truth to us, and we found out that not only was it not our fault as far as it coming into the community, that there were other players involved, government players involved, and Daoud will take over from here. I'm rambling.
Well, Gary Webb is one of my personal heroes. It really saddened when he left this earth. He had picked up from earlier work that had been done by a man named Robert Perry, which forced the society at the time, the government at the time,
if you feel this, go ahead, sorry.
Which forced the government to have hearings on what would later be called the Iran-Contra scandal. Mm-hmm. And it was the findings in that scandal that would later be further explored by Senator John Kerry, who would investigate the implications that Mr. Perry had also indicated were involved in CIA and Nicaraguan Contra measures that was resulting in drug shipments to the United States. Well, the Kerry Commission finished in about 91, I believe, or 90, or 89. And they determined that it was the truth, that in fact was happening. Now, what should happen at that point is that the people in the so-called Justice Department should come up with some charges mm-hmm. and go in for further investigations. Well, that never happened. The matter was pretty much summarily dropped. And it's another thing about undiscussed news. It was another reason why it was summarily dropped was because there was not much coverage of those findings at the time. And Iran-Contra was identified, and in everybody's mind, everything from the symbolism of Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North with his hand raised, all the way to excuses that were made from a former CIA director, George Bush Sr., claiming that he was left out of the loop, and Ronald Reagan claiming that he was sleeping through most of those meetings. So they were never held truly accountable for it. It was just pretty much washed away as a gripe between political parties ultimately. But Senator Kerry found the goods.
Right.
And like I said, nothing was done. So then you have Gary Webb picking up the piece because he kept running into the by the late 90s or the mid 90s, the ravages of that crack cocaine was still having on the black community at that time. And so he picked up where Mr. Perry left off and dived more deeper into those connections and found not only were they present at that time and bringing them in, he was able to identify shipments that were coming in. He was able to identify the names of the players. A lot of this came right out of Oliver North's diary, which is, oh my God. And so he's credited, Mr. Gary Webb is credited with being the first viral internet news story ever. And it was largely because African Americans, ADOS, got online, were encouraged to get online and share this information. And so our numbers grew in terms of internet usage at the time because of that story. So you have that happening to Gary Webb, who ultimately, as we talked about today in our archive dive, he was discredited by the system, whether it be the New York Times, LA Times, and his own paper, the Mercury News. They basically stabbed him in the back and undermined the effectiveness of his story. Only it's after his death, which took place by way of suicide, which took place by way of 2 .38 caliber bullets to the back of the head. Think, nod, nod, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And here we have the CIA in the early 2000s, at first saying that they denied Gary Webb's story and all the evidence that was in that totally corroborated. But then about 2 years later, the CIA says, yes, we kind of looked the other way when all that was going on. And they chimed in. We had to do this because we were worried about the commies getting a foothold in South America. Even though by the time they were doing this, it's already been documented. This is another little thing that we don't get to hear. It was already documented that basically the United States had basically propped up the Soviet Union to keep them going longer because it was making so much money for the military industrial complex industries. So that's a little side note. But so there was at that time, towards the end of the 90s, there was no serious need or concern not to pursue this as though it was going to undermine. That was a hint the CIA was giving, that it was going to undermine our efforts to get rid of communism. So ultimately, it was they're focusing on, well, we looked the other way as drugs were coming to the society because that was helping us in our fight against communism. At the same time, they were willing to let black people suffer.
Right.
And so the New York Times, the LA Times, and other journals who bashed Gary Webb they are the example, not just objective news. If they were objective, they would have followed the evidence wherever it led. But these institutions, I call them white domination racist media, are often in line with pursuing an agenda that is all too often not in our best interest.
Yeah. I like that rapid news piece that you did. You broke it down, 10 things that Gary Webb, here it is, 10 things to know about Gary Webb. 1, he followed the crack supply chain. 2, the impact of crack cocaine on Black communities. 3, the Webb's Dark Alliance was the first investigative story to go viral. 4, Webb was unprepared for the uproar in the Black communities. I don't understand why that. Number 5, 1989, the Senate investigation showed the U.S. government knew about it. Number 6, Webb's Dark Alliance forced the U.S. government into PR defense mode. Number 7, mainstream media attacked Webb. He became the target after releasing all this information. Number 8, a feature film vindicated Webb to some degree. Do you know that film?
Yes, I do. Kill the Messenger.
Kill the Messenger. So everybody look up the movie Kill the Messenger. I have not seen it, and I'm interested in watching that myself.
It didn't get a lot of publicity for the very reasons we are having difficulty dealing with it now. It was ultimately suppressed. It didn't get all the wide release that it should have. It didn't get the publicity and money for publicity. all of it was to just say, okay, yeah, we did it. We did a real good objective work on this, and here's a movie that proves it. But
Right.
if a lot of people don't see it, it doesn't generate discussion, and therefore it just goes away.
Right. Okay, number 9, Webb's life after Dark Alliance. He resigned from the Mercury News. He published a book based on the Dark Alliance series and did freelance investigative reporting. So he basically went underground, right?
Well, he was surviving at that point. He's kind of doing what I'm doing now, although I know I don't get paid as much as he did, and that is doing investigative journalist work on the side.
Okay.
So he did that as a mainstay, and so he would pick up jobs and write for newspapers and send it in, and then get paid that way. That's the way he was sustaining himself. But it really a far fall for a person as good as he was. It really shouldn't have happened.
Mm-hmm. And lastly, number 10, his death, which was controversial in the sense that it was deemed a suicide, but he had 2 caliber bullets to the back of his head. So we know we don't shoot ourselves twice in the back of heads. So we'll leave it there, or unless Daoud wants to elaborate.
Well, we already know somebody listening. I don't want to give them a plateful as they have me in a torture chamber, because he was working
Right.
working on something that's another reason why he had to. It could have, what he was working on could have revitalized his career, and it had to be stopped.
Okay.
So I know what it was, but I will not go there. I'll do that another time. I'll do that in my book.
Okay. Okay. Okay, and then lastly, in episode 3, first of all, I hope you guys are enjoying the episodes the way that the format is. Let us know your thoughts on the format. Let us know any feedback is good, bad, and different. We'll listen and do what it takes to present a great show for you guys. But the main event in episode 3 was inside a Russian troll factory in Ghana. This was a CNN video report broadcast that I did play a little clip of it to give you a little context to frame the conversation, so to speak, as Yvette would say. And but this story, as ADOS knows, it's been a drumbeat in the ADOS movement, in the sense that not since in the movement, but since Donald Trump was elected, and that is that Black America, ADOS, was influenced by Russia in the election, and stoked a lot of racial mess, I guess you could call it, online, and created this atmosphere where we were, one, against voting, and then against voting for Hillary Clinton at the time. And so Daoud chose this article. Let's start off with your thoughts on Inside a Russian Troll Factory. We interviewed the reporter. Her name is Clarissa, right? Clarissa.
Yep.
I remember her name because Clarissa didn't have a lot of answers to questions. So we interviewed her. We interview articles. And when we interview articles, we pull out questions to see if we could get answers for you guys. So that's what the main events are. We believe that this broadcast was done ahead of the 2020 elections, to stoke the flame that, once again, the Russians are after the Black community, to get us to not vote, or I'm not sure what the Russians are trying to do. What are they saying? And once again, we are. Oh, and by way of not only Russians but Ghanaians, with the help of Ghanaians, our brothers and sisters in Ghana had a couple factories, Russian troll factories. I mean, it's true. These factories, troll factories, existed, and they probably exist across the world, but they found the ones in Ghana. Okay. And but I want Daoud to pick up where, even if they were trolling factories, ADOS, y'all know we go out our doors. I don't need no Russian to tell me what's going on in my neighborhood. I can see it for myself. I can see what the CBC is tweeting. Are you okay? Thank you. And I can see our, as Daoud calls it, our missed leadership class not affecting any change in our communities, whether that's on a local, state, congressional, whatever level. So Daoud, why'd you choose this story, and what did you think about it?
I chose this story because it is part and parcel of what you've just been talking about. It's used as an excuse to blame Black folks for the 2016 election. And as you also wisely identified, this is sort of projecting the idea that the same dynamics will take place in the 2020 presidential elections. And I'm of the belief that they're going to be doing this and some other things, but particularly this, because this did so well, of basically blaming the Russians for Black angst, and which takes multiple forms. One of those forms is protest. One of those other forms is voting or not voting. So that's another thing that's being done. And as I discussed during our podcast, this is just an old tool they take out from time to time to limit or to squash among whites what they think. So that's where I believe that this and other pieces were. And note that this came out, the recent manifestation of this tool came out after just leading up to the 2016 elections, because they were aware of Black angst and that it could play a role in Clinton's numbers. And they were. I mean, Hillary Clinton, when she was going to places, she couldn't get a crowd. I mean, that was an indicator. They knew that. No Russians doing that. No Russians telling people to stay home. So when did she get crowds? She got crowds when she got entertainers, particularly Black entertainers, in areas where they wanted to maintain a Black stronghold. That's where she went. And that's where she got crowds. So we don't have to debate, I hope not, why she was getting large crowds in those particular events. She also took for granted or did not want to be seen as advocating for the Black vote. Two things indicated this. Charles Schumer said, and to reporters, that they are going to try to get the white votes that usually vote, that white voters who usually vote Republican. They were out to get them. So they definitely did not want to be seen as advocates for Black people. Number two, a little problem with WikiLeaks, which is why he has to be hunted down. They unleashed a series of emails where they admitted in a memo that they could be seen listening and meeting with Black Lives Matter movement people, but you're to give them nothing. I mean, that was powerful. And people heard this, and they don't have to go too far. I should have mentioned there's a third point. We have the experience of the Obama administration. So when you had Hillary Clinton saying she's going to usher in the third term of Obama, plus this other stuff I've just mentioned, you're not going to enthuse Black people of any stripe, any people of any stripe, that you're going to be there for them, given that recent history that was still ever present in people's minds. His image sells things, and at some point, people, we got to do something about his image, but I won't go there right now. But his image, it got Biden pretty much South Carolina for a reason, his image, but not when you get into specifically what he's done. That's where you get some problems, especially when he's responsible for shifting 95% of all incomes throughout his period in office went to the 1% of Americans. And they didn't look like us overwhelmingly. So you have those factors in culminating or resulting in a relatively low black voter turnout as compared to the time Obama was running. And as a result of that, the DNC and I have to say this, the CIA, which we have to confront them at some point too about all this, they decided to work on a campaign of undermining Donald Trump by way of the Russia hacking gate lie. And encompassed in that was a Russian super information infiltration gathering approach through the internet to stoke racial tensions among black people. So as we come out of the loss that she took in 2016, we have these being used as explanations for why the popular, it was telling us all this in the polls, Hillary Clinton did not get the White House. So sadly, that worked to get people away from asking the questions I asked and also venturing into the other reasons why Donald Trump wins, especially when 8 million white people voted for Obama and the same 8 million voted for Trump. So you got to do something to explain that away. And the Russian troll idea and factory was used. And why I chose this, now I'm finally to it, why I chose this particular one is because it wasn't this particular one that was projecting that the Russians are going to mess with things in the future. It was to display the formula this tool utilizes. So the questions I thought up for the piece, the interviewing of the piece, were questions that were derived from the formula they use. They don't use so much passive voice talk in this, but they use euphemisms and words like mysterious and all these words, stoking racial tensions. All these are critical keywords they use to excite the listener or viewer. And they're not meant to do anything other than to churn in your mind's eye and your emotions negative feelings to what they're talking about.
The
and
black voters really like they're already starting early blaming black voters because apparently the Russians are after us. Now none of the candidates through this whole primary season addressed ADOS except of course Marianne Williams and Tom Steyer, who they quickly got the boot. But the main candidates from Biden to Bernie never addressed ADOS and our agenda and what we need. But it's the Russians and despite all of that, we still got Biden where he is the nominee. But but it's the Russians. No, it's not the candidates and their platforms and their. I don't ever recall seeing Biden in places that he needed to be.
If he could speak his own name. He
went to a couple of churches or something. They really kept him away from the black community because those pesky blacks that ask questions and they demand things. So they kept him away from us, and so maybe that was a good tactic, good campaign trickery. Not talk to him, not show him, because we were angry about his crime bill and they kept him away. And then but it's not the candidate, it's not the DNC or the Republicans. They don't have an agenda either. It's none of these politicians' problem. It's the black voters, once again, pointing fingers at us for not voting for any of their evil people. Now, whether they evil or maybe it's just that we have learned they do nothing. And for some of us, that's not good enough, okay? That's not good enough. And it ain't the Russians that has anything to do with it. And like you said, all the reasons why Hillary didn't connect with folks, and then all the reasons why any of the DNC candidates didn't connect again with us, even despite we still, a lot of people went out and voted for them. A lot of people feel like they don't have any other choice because they so are scared of the big bad boogeyman. And so if it happens again, a lot of the Roland Martins, a lot of the Van Jones, well, we'll see about, I don't remember Van Jones so much, but definitely Roland Martin was like, it was Black people's fault, Black men in particular, and he went after Black men and their vote, or not voting. And of course it was sexism, it was a woman, or it was the Russians, the bots got us, and they're at it again. Really? The bots are at it again. The Russian bots are at it again. Not your candidates. Not anything that they're doing. It's the Russians. It's Black people, the voters themselves. So,
well, notice that this piece did not spend any time talking about bots. I sincerely believe that they would have if we, ADOS, had not been doing an effective job of dispelling the fallacy of that myth. But because they know that we're out here, and that was where I was getting ready to lead to, is that they know that we're out here, they're getting pushback from us. They knew not to go with that Russian bot thing. If we had not effectively done so, you would have heard that mentioned in this thing, the use of bots and how they also infiltrate. Now they could just talk about it generally in terms of what Russian trolls do, and we know what trolls do. So those are key words just to get us excited. The other aspect I wanted to get to was the reality also is the vast majority of those operations were not Russian going into America, trying to get the American market. And while some of them were troll farms out there doing that from all kinds of countries, they were mainly clickbait farms that were just meant to get clicks so they can sell products and get into the American market. That's what a majority of these groups were out there doing. And that's why recently, and I'm glad your idea was to have this, because I didn't mention this during the thing. Sometimes I do leave things out. The Mueller report pointed to the Russian firms that were involved. And so everybody was just like gangbusters waiting for the hearing to start to see these guys prosecuted. What they did not expect was about 2 weeks ago, these guys showed up. They showed up to be prosecuted because they were going to come up with evidence that they have nothing to do with all these crazy implications that here in America, they have us trained almost like Pavlov's dogs on. And you know what happened when they came into court?
What's that?
They dismissed the hearing because they knew that they were going to come up with evidence that they weren't botting in a particular area that they were claiming using Russian bots. And they weren't a troll farm. They were a clickbait farm. And they were just out to get clicks and get notice, and they were going to provide documented evidence of this. And they've had a history of doing the very same things before, during, and after the elections in 2016. And the American media, who did not follow up on this, they just reported that the issue was dropped, but no one really got an explanation for that. Well, the explanation would have been there was nothing to the Russia hacking gate lie. That's what they didn't want to explode. And there definitely wasn't anything in regards to ADOS that was of significance to their investigation. So the use of trolls went out the window then. They're just banking on you, or most people, not following up on that. So the Mueller investigation closes with a whimper. And this investigation into the Russian troll farm closes with a whimper. But CNN is nice enough to care about us. No, they really care about forming and shaping white collective opinion of us. So
and really,
preparing.
I'm sorry, but really taking them off the hook. Blaming us and then taking them off the hook for their voting practices. Nobody's addressing that. And since then, of course, we've learned, okay, well, 80 to 90% of white people vote Republican, for majority. So it's not us. We are 86, 90% Democrat. So no, don't point the finger at us, point it at yourself. You know,
Really?
and then as a matter of fact, save yourself. The election's coming up. Save yourself. If you feel you need to be saved, save yourself. So another thing that you pointed out in the episode was, well, what became of these trolling factories? What results did it produce?
Yes.
Did it cause Black Americans, ADOS, to rise up? No. Did it cause us to go out and fight, cause harm on, other Americans because of all of these racial angst that they were trying to stoke? What did it produce? And you also pointed out that they found out it was $50,000 worth of advertising that they did. And Hillary Clinton's campaign, was it in the billions, or how much was it? It was 100 billion?
It was closer to the billion mark. And again, they also gave Donald Trump free advertising to almost the tune of $6 billion. And so all these billion-dollar campaigns was ultimately toppled by $54,700. I'm sorry, it's impossible. It doesn't make sense.
Doesn't.
But that's the reason why that can't be included in such reports.
Yeah. It was it was one of those articles we interviewed where we were able to kind of get in an attack mode, where we're like, we got to push back. And to your credit, you saw that we needed to push back on this narrative that Russians are kind of have dangling the carrot in front of African Americans, ADOS, and that's just not the case. Simply being American, living in America, being up under our political system, being up under our economic system, automatically causes us to just up under our voting rights alone, causes us just to just have a sour taste in our mouth for the whole political process. So there's nothing any outsider has to do for us to, if we're paying enough attention to see already what our political and economic system is doing to us, and then at the same time feeling that we can't exact change in that system, is another reason that Black people vote the way that they do. So
and that's what the studies say, and that's another thing that reports like this try to combat. Most people don't know that they did want to find out, even though the answer should have been obvious. Why are so many Black people willing to protest in the last 5 years? From Tamir Rice and others, they wanted to know what was doing it, and because they knew we wouldn't be so excited and willing to protest because of what was going on in the standard news. So they looked at all mediums and found that it was the social networking software mediums that Black people are on that has played more of a role in getting us to go out there and get in people's faces. So they found that about 2015. And so if you are a part of the DNC and you want to explain away why so many Blacks did not vote for you, well, you can't say it's because they're concerned about their issues, because then the question would come, well, what are you doing about those issues? It had to be Russians and Russian bots that get us to do these things they were seeing, and that's what they shifted it to. So again, you've got CNN, all the major news media covering this as though it's valid, when really it was established as a response to the fact that our level of activism was rising because we were sharing amongst ourselves on social media. And that had to be explained away by way of an outside interloper causing all this dissension among Blacks. I mean, it's a ploy that's, sadly, we've allowed it as a group to work at times. And this time it just didn't make any sense, but Black people kind of don't challenge it. Well, hopefully our podcast gave them a lot of good reasons to challenge it.
And you'll notice the result of them finding out, okay, well, it was our social media activity and not their propaganda news. Once they found out, then the the clamps started coming down, the censorship started coming down. You know, posts are most of those black voices that were legitimate then were silenced, and they just, you know, when they're put in Facebook jail for 30 days at a time, back to back, you know, they get disenchanted and just, you know, you don't hear from those voices again. And that is the result of them clamping down on what is really not Russians they're clamping down on. They're clamping down on what they call now misinformation, and it's really just censorship. It's censorship. And so yeah, any last words on the trolling Russians? How do we feel about the Ghanaians doing what they was doing? I understand you're saying, okay, they were poor and they just took advantage of being able to get the coin, you know, but I mean, come on, Ghanaians.
Well, I'm sorry. I guess this is my what is it? Pan-Africanism showing out.
Mm-hmm.
Within the context of having life there and suffering levels of poverty, who am I to condemn them for doing things for survival? If I can't do it there, if I question myself for doing it there, then I can also question myself when people in the 80s were selling and distributing crack, as bad as it was. And the people I treated at the time, I was in drug and alcohol at the time. I hated what they were doing, but at the same time, a lot of them had no alternatives because other systems were denying them, were undermining them. And this was a fine, quick, easy way to promote survival. Now, we can condemn that, but we can also condemn, like we did really well in the archive today, really condemn the situations that bring that about. And so in the report we did, I mentioned neocolonialism. It hasn't gone anywhere, which has come out by the dear lady, Dr. Africana, I think is her name is right now. I'm sorry, I can't remember it right now. She has busted the French in manipulating markets to a tune of $500 billion out of an African country. That's going to leave some people in that country poor. So that's neocolonialism still active. To what degree is it going on in Ghana? Well, the degree to which the Ghana government was pretty much forced to assist the American military and by way of, now I can't remember the name of the group, to attack Libya a few years ago. You know, they're not doing this because they're wealthy nations and all that stuff. They're doing it because they have to be the boot heel at times for European and American aggression on the continent. And so,
well, in a sense, I mean, you know, there is a positive and negative, yes, in regards to, not a positive and negative, but there is another way of looking at it, and that is that, okay, well, they took opportunity, income opportunity. It affected ADOS here in the sense that we were politically blamed, and then look negatively towards in our political system here as the people that didn't vote for Hillary Clinton or whatever. And so, okay, I won't.
I don't think a Ghanaian is going to be so much. I don't think a Ghanaian is going to be so much worried about our election returns. They're going to be worried about feeding their children, just like the guy on the street corner. He's worried about putting food on the plate for his family. I don't like what they're doing. At the same time, I do understand. And at the same time, we need to put pressure to bear on the situation that creates those decisions. So that's what I love about.
Well, okay. And also don't be hypocritical and call us, you know, drug dealers.
I definitely agree with that. I definitely agree with that.
If you're willing to do some of the same things that we're willing to do to get the coins, to get those coins, then okay, you're just as in the same boat as us, you know.
Exactly, and it's the same analysis that Yvette does draw on when she says we are not condemning the fact that there are people at the border that do need help. What we condemn are the American foreign policies that creates that. And it's the same logic. I can condemn what they're doing At the same time, I understand it, but I also have to condemn the situations that bring those things about.
Yeah, but them folks at the border is already anti-black, and they come here anti-black, and so let me move on.
Okay.
But yeah, Clarissa Ward is the writer. Not right. This was a broadcast news report. She, as we pointed out, left out a lot of information. You can see where Daoud was asking those questions, and we just could not find the answers anywhere to give you guys. We look forward to doing more of those, because a lot of these articles, some of them which are just 2 to 3 paragraphs, and you telling me, and it really is clickbait. You're telling, and you want to report on the ADOS community and the ADOS life with 2 paragraphs, you know, and we've seen a lot of articles that are about ADOS in this past year and a half. So I wouldn't say fair, but leans more towards the negative side, towards ADOS. Those articles are lacking as well. So you know, there are going to be times where articles just don't have the information that you guys need. Yeah, you can follow up and go deeper in your own time, but busy moms, busy fathers, busy, you know, folks working 2 or 3 gigs, you know, and it just so happens that right now, of course, with COVID, we have a little bit more time, but with that little bit more time, the news is triple. I don't know if you guys noticed, but it's just a lot of news and information that's flowing. A lot of it good, a lot of it bad, a lot of it is misinformation, and you got to navigate through it. You know, a lot of personal columns and things going on, and how they feel about COVID, not what the COVID really is. So at times you'll see those type of articles. And then last thing, unless Darla, you have another point you wanted to make about that story?
No, I'm fine.
Okay. And the last segment of episode 3 was I played a clip from Michael Dawson, who wrote The Future of Black Politics. He did an interview, and I believe he's a professor at University of Chicago at the time. Maybe he still is, but he did this interview October 26, 2011. Of course, President Obama was still, you know, doing what he was doing. And I sensed in this interview that he was really proud of Obama. And anyway, and then, but he laid out what he thought the future of Black politics was. And one of the points that he pointed out was that he was noticing that most of our Black institutions, the church, NAACP, the Urban League, the Nation of Islam as well, all of our Black institutions were not being as effective as they once were in the civil rights movement. And I agree, and I believe Yvette touched on a lot of this and created the Project Takeover, in the sense that, okay, ADOS got to go back into these institutions and take over and get Black people back. Now you can see how our episodes go when I cut it out on the editing for it. Anyway, but get Black people back on the Black agenda in these organizations, because we are off of their agendas and the immigrants are on their agendas. So those institutions are no longer effective in creating momentum in any movement. You know, it starts and then it stops. There's no, and you can see what those institutions did with the civil rights case recently. They didn't even show up to the steps, you know? So he pointed this out in 2011. He pointed this out, and I wanted you guys to catch that and see that, you know, Yvette and Tone were right on time with Project Takeover, because they still to this day are ineffective. They can't move mountains. They can't even move us to the seats in the church. So how, you know, ADOS is going to have to fight and take over those institutions, or just continue to do us and grow our movement, and then they'll come to us. What do you think about it?
I totally agree. One of the pushbacks at the time when I was begging people to either take a closer look at Mr. Obama and or not support him back in the summer of 2007, the pushback I was get, well, you know, you can't expect him to do everything. And that is true to a degree. What we can expect is that the institutions that have risen from our struggle, we can't expect them to at least help push him the rest of the way. And whatever he doesn't do, they should advocate for or try to fight. Well, that did not happen. That didn't happen. And anytime that anything serious of note that was impacting us, from police brutality and even the rising of Black child suicides, sorry, got to do my deep breathing there, they allowed to be not ventured into, not focused on, not pressure the president at that time, because they saw that as a way of hurting him, because he couldn't look too obvious doing something specific for us. So when does the CBC, the den of misleadership class extraordinaire, what do? They don't study or call for a study of Black child suicides when they start emerging in 2013, 2014, 2015, 2016. They called for a study of this phenomenon in the summer of 2019. Project Takeover is needed. Project Takeover, we need to get more aggressive. Project Takeover is overdue. Our children are killing themselves. Period.
Yeah, period. So, yeah, in a nutshell, guys, that was episode 3. First of all, we want to thank you guys for listening and sharing the podcast. Thank you so much. What else? You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Periscope, Twitch. All of these live videos will be posted in those places. So Twitter, yeah, and Twitter as well. And so find us in all of those places, follow and subscribe. We look forward to bringing you guys live discussions every Sunday evening. If you don't catch us live, that's okay. Go ahead and watch us now. Watch us while you got a chance. And unless there's any final words, Daoud, you all good over there?
I'm all good.
Okay. All right, that's episode 3. Look forward to episode 4 coming this Thursday. And I think you're gonna love this one as well. Also, you'll see us sharing articles all week long. Every day we'll try to give you some news that's going on around the world that affects ADOS. All right, guys, have a great Sunday evening. Holla at you. All